The day I turned 18, I became an official adult, a free man, the system said. But there was nothing freeing about it. There was no grand celebration, no birthday cake, just a box with 2 worn-out changes of clothes, a book I had outgrown, and an envelope containing my identity. My life, all 18 years of it, was summed up in a few sheets of paper and the absence of any real love or connection. Mr. Henderson, the group home director, slid the box across his sterile desk with the same detachment he'd shown to all the others before me. He didn't need to say anything. I was just another name on a list. "Here you go, Leo," he said, barely looking up. "You're free now." My freedom didn't feel like an open door, it felt like a cliff. For 12 years my life had been dictated by a schedule. Meals at 7 a.m., school at 8, curfew at 9. Everything had been decided for me, and now, all of a sudden, the blank page of my future was terrifying. I tried to collect myself, but the weight of it all was suffocating. As if sensing my unease, Mr. Henderson handed me another envelope, this one from a law firm. "This came for you," he muttered. "Important, from a lawyer named Albright." The name felt alien to me. "Who is this from?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "No idea," he said, already turning his attention to a stack of papers. "They just said it was about your mom's estate." The mention of my mother, Sarah Vance, hit me like a punch to the gut, the woman who had vanished from my life when I was 6. The woman whose face I could barely remember, except for the smell of rain and the faint hum of a song she used to sing. I had always told myself she abandoned me, that I wasn't worth staying for. That night I spent my first night as an adult in a cheap motel by the highway, where the hum of passing trucks was my only company. I opened the envelope slowly, uncertain of what it might contain. An estate. The word felt foreign, like something from a movie. It didn't belong in my life. It couldn't possibly be connected to my mother. But when I read the letter, it spoke of inheritance, of legal jargon that I couldn't even begin to understand. The gist, however, was clear. The letter was a summons to meet with a lawyer named Ms. Eleanor Albright. The following morning, I found myself at her office. The place was a high-rise tower, all sleek glass and shiny surfaces, worlds away from the worn linoleum and peeling walls of the group home. I walked in, feeling out of place in my faded hoodie and jeans, and was immediately met by a receptionist who didn't even bother to hide her disapproval. But Ms. Albright was different. She greeted me with a firm handshake, and despite her age, her sharp eyes and unflappable demeanor spoke of a mind that had seen it all. She led me into her office, a corner room with a staggering view of the city. "Leo," she began, folding her hands neatly on the desk. "I was your mother's attorney." The words hung in the air, heavy and almost impossible to believe. My mother had a lawyer. Had she cared enough in the end to leave something behind for me? "Your mother's estate is not large," Ms. Albright continued. "In fact, it's mostly a liability." She slid a file across the desk, and as I opened it, I saw photographs of a small cottage, one that looked like it had been abandoned for years. The windows were boarded up, the roof sagging under the weight of time. The pictures didn't show a home, they showed a ruin. "She inherited it from her grandmother," Ms. Albright said. "It's about a 4-hour bus ride from here, out in a place called Stone Creek. It's been in your family for generations." I stared at the photographs. A cottage, this was my inheritance. I had expected something, anything of value. Instead, it was a house falling apart, surrounded by overgrown weeds and dead trees. It was a reminder of the mother who had left me behind. "There's more," Ms. Albright said, pulling me back to the present. "There are back taxes owed on the property, 5 years' worth, $7,000. The number hit me like a slap. I had $312 to my name, the leftover scraps of my childhood provided by the state. "I know it's a lot," she said, her voice softening. "But there's also an offer on the property." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Who wants to buy it? Oakwood Development, she replied. They want to build a resort in the area. They've made an offer of $25,000 for the land. The $7,000 in back taxes will be deducted from that, and you'll walk away with about $18,000 after my fees. The number spun in my head. $18,000, more money than I had ever seen in my life. I could take the money, sell the land, and escape the past. I could build a new life, free from the ghosts of Sarah Vance. But something inside me resisted. There had to be more to my mother's story than this. I need to see it first, I said, surprising even myself, before I sign anything. Albright raised an eyebrow. Leo, the property is in terrible condition. The roof is collapsing. The walls are falling apart. The land may be worth something, but the house is a liability. I don't care, I said. I need to see it for myself. She studied me for a long moment, then sighed, as though conceding to an inevitable decision. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small brass key tied with a faded piece of red yarn. This is the only key, she said, handing it to me. The bus to Stone Creek leaves at 8:00 a.m. Tomorrow, it only runs once a day. Be careful, Leo. The place holds on to the past. The bus ride to Stone Creek was long and uncomfortable, just as Ms. Albright had warned me. The old bus rattled and groaned its way out of the city, the smell of stale air mingling with the faint scent of grease. As we left the city behind, I watched the concrete jungle shrink away, replaced by sprawling suburbs, strip malls, and then, finally, open farmland stretching to the horizon. I stared out the window, watching the landscape change, wondering what I was doing. The idea of a house, an old, decaying house that had been abandoned for years, seemed so far removed from the reality I had lived. What was I hoping to find? A treasure chest. An answer to the questions I had buried deep inside me. The other passengers were quiet, lost in their own worlds. An elderly woman with a grocery bag sat across from me, her eyes half closed. A young man in a paint-splattered work shirt slept, his head pressed against the window. A mother tried to hush her crying baby, her tired eyes darting nervously at everyone around her. I felt small among them, invisible, just another person in transit from one life to another. The bus finally reached its destination, Stone Creek. The town looked like something out of a postcard, a place where time had come to a standstill. There were no flashing lights, no bustling crowds, just a single blinking traffic light, an old gas station with vintage pumps, and a general store with a faded Coca-Cola sign hanging above the porch. I stepped off the bus, my feet hitting the cracked pavement. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the stillness was almost deafening. The town was quiet, too quiet. I had never been in a place like this before, where nothing seemed to be in a hurry. I walked into the general store, hoping to find someone who could point me in the right direction. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. An old man sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper. He looked up over his glasses and studied me for a moment. "Help you?" he asked, his voice rough like gravel. "I'm looking for this address," I said, showing him the sticky note with Ms. Albright's writing on it. He squinted at the note, then a flicker of recognition passed over his face. "The old Vance place," he muttered. "Haven't had anyone ask about that in years." "You family?" "Her son," I replied, unsure why the words felt so strange in my mouth. The man studied me for a moment, his gaze lingering. "Well, I'll be," he said under his breath. "You've got her eyes." He gave me directions, telling me it was about 2 miles out of town. The road wasn't well maintained, he warned, full of potholes and overgrown grass. I nodded, feeling a strange sensation in my chest. There was something about this place, about these people, that felt familiar yet foreign at the same time. I walked back outside and started the long trek down the dirt road. The path was a far cry from the smooth pavement I was used to. It quickly turned from gravel to rutted dirt, more weeds than road. The trees lined the path, their branches stretching above like a canopy, shutting out the sky. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of my boots against the earth and the distant calls of crows. The walk felt endless, as though I was crossing into a different world, a world that held secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. And then, through the trees, I saw it, the cottage. It was exactly as Ms. Albright had described, only worse. The pictures hadn't done it justice. The house looked like it had been left to die slowly over time. The wood was weathered and gray, the porch sagging as though it might collapse at any moment. The plywood over the windows seemed to stare back at me like blindfolds on a condemned man. I stood there for a moment, just staring at the ruin that was supposed to be my inheritance. I felt a strange mix of anger and resignation. This was all I had left of my mother, this decaying shell. I walked up the steps, each one creaking under my weight. The key felt heavy in my hand. I put it into the lock, but the door wouldn't budge. It had swollen shut from years of neglect. I pushed against it, but it didn't give. Frustrated, I walked around the house, trying to find another way in. I found a small window on the side, its board slightly loose. I pried at it with my hands, pulling with all my strength. The wood came free with a groan, and I squeezed through the small opening, dropping to the floor inside. The house was dark, the air thick with dust and the smell of rot. The light that filtered through the uncovered window was weak, casting long shadows on the floor. The place felt frozen in time, like nothing had moved in years. I moved slowly, stepping carefully through the rooms. Each one felt like a memory that had been abandoned, a living room with an old armchair, its stuffing spilling out, a bathroom with a rusted tub, and then the bedroom. This room felt different. It was small, the bed frame empty, stripped of its mattress, but there was something else about it, something I couldn't quite explain. I ran my hand along the dusty dresser, and then I felt it, the sensation of something hidden beneath the surface. I knelt down, my knees creaking as I reached for the floor. One of the boards was raised just slightly, and my heart began to race. I pried at it, lifting it up without a sound. Underneath, there was a small metal box. I pulled it out, feeling its weight in my hands. It was cold, solid, heavy. I sat down on the floor and opened it slowly. Inside were letters, lots of them, tied together in neat bundles with twine. And there on top was a single envelope with my name written in my mother's handwriting. I opened it, the words inside catching in my throat. "My dearest Leo," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone and you are finally home." I took a deep breath and forced myself to keep reading, even as my fingers trembled against the paper. The words on the page felt like a lifeline, something I'd been searching for my entire life and never thought I'd find. "I know you must have so many questions," my mother's letter continued. "I know you must hate me for leaving, but leaving you was not abandonment. It was a sacrifice, the hardest and most necessary thing I've ever done." I had to stop reading, my vision blurring with tears I didn't know I had. I wiped them away angrily and forced myself to continue. "Your father was a good man, Leo, but he made a terrible mistake. He borrowed money from a very dangerous person to start his business, a man named Silas Thorne. When the business failed, your father couldn't pay him back. Thorne doesn't run a bank, my love. He runs on fear. After your father died, the debt became mine. Thorne and his people, they came to our apartment. They made threats not just to me. They talked about you. They described your school, your walk home. They knew everything. The dusty air in the room felt thick, hard to breathe. I could almost feel the cold dread she must have felt. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything. Thorne was clever. There was no paper trail, no evidence, just his reputation. I knew I couldn't protect you if we stayed together. He would have used you to control me, to hurt me. So I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I disappeared, and I made you disappear too. I put you into the system, knowing they would move you, change your name for a while, keep you safe in a way I no longer could. I told myself it was like a witness protection program. It was the only way to break the trail, to make sure Thorne's people could never find you. I came here to your great-grandmother's cottage, this forgotten place. I boarded it up, lived like a ghost. I worked odd jobs for cash in the next town over, saved every penny. I spent every waking moment thinking of you, writing to you, even though I knew I could never send the letters. This box, Leo, this box is my life. It's the story of the years we lost. I need you to read them. I need you to understand. This house isn't a ruin, it's a fortress. It was my sanctuary. And I pray that one day it can be yours. Don't let them take it. It's all I have to give you. It's everything. All my love forever, Mom. The letter slipped from my hands. The words hit me like a tidal wave. I had spent years blaming her for leaving me, for abandoning me. But the truth was something far more painful. She hadn't abandoned me. She had saved me. I sat there in the dusty silence of the cottage, the weight of her words crushing me. I had spent so many years building walls around my heart, convincing myself that I wasn't worth loving. But my mother's sacrifice shattered those walls. She hadn't just disappeared, she had fought for me. She had sacrificed everything, not because she didn't love me, but because she loved me so much. I couldn't stop crying. It was a raw, guttural release, the kind of grief I had never allowed myself to feel. I cried for the child who had been left alone, thinking he was unlovable. I cried for the teenager who had built walls of anger to protect himself from the pain. And I cried for her, for the woman who had lived in hiding, writing letters to a son she couldn't see, all to keep him safe. For hours I sat in that room, surrounded by the dust and decay of the cottage. The silence had shifted. It was no longer oppressive, it was reverent. It was the silence of a place that had held a long, painful secret. A secret of love, sacrifice, and survival. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound felt jarring, intrusive in the stillness of the house. I checked the message. It was from Ms. Albright. Leo, just checking in. Have you had a chance to reconsider the offer? Oakwood is getting impatient. I stared at the screen, the glow of the message illuminating the dim room. $18,000. The offer felt disgusting now. It was blood money. They wanted to bulldoze this place, to erase everything my mother had fought for. They wanted to turn her sacrifice into a commodity. But fear still lingered. $18,000 was a way out. It was an escape from the broken past, the taxes, the collapsing roof, and the ghosts that haunted me. I was 18, with no job, no security, and barely enough money to get by. What was I supposed to do? Stay here, fight Sela's Thorne? It was insane. But then something changed. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about honoring her story. It was about standing up for her, for the woman who had fought for me when no one else would. It was about the legacy of love she had left me, hidden in a dusty old house, waiting to be uncovered. I opened the box of letters and began reading them one by one, the faint light from the window casting a soft glow over the pages. My mother had written about her life, about her strength, about the fear that had never left her. But there was more. She had fought back. She hadn't just hidden. She had been working, digging into the man who had terrorized her and her family. In one letter, dated 2 years after she left me, she wrote, "Leo, I've started to follow him. Not literally, that would be too dangerous. But I've been digging into old newspapers, public records. Thorne isn't just a lone shark. He's connected to real estate. He uses his threats to force people to sell their properties to shell companies he controls. Companies like Oakwood Development. They're vultures, Leo. They pick at the bones of this town." The revelation hit me like a hammer. Oakwood wasn't just a developer. They were connected to Thorne. They were part of the same system of fear and control. The same system that had driven my mother into hiding. They wanted to take everything she had fought for, and now they wanted to take it from me. Another letter, written just a year before her death, gave me the final piece of the puzzle. Your great-grandfather built this house with secrets, Leo. And I've been putting everything I've found in a loose stone behind the stove. It's not much, but it might be enough. There's also a little something to help with the taxes. It's in a sealed envelope. Be brave, my Leo. I stood up, my heart racing as I made my way to the living room. The old stove stood near the stone fireplace. I knelt down, my fingers tracing the rough stones. One of them shifted slightly under my touch. I pulled at it, and with a groan it lifted out, revealing a hidden space. Inside was another box, this one smaller, wooden. I opened it and my breath caught. It contained a black ledger, photographs of Thorne with men I didn't recognize, old cassette tapes labeled with dates, and beneath it all, stacks of cash, rubber-banded together. The envelope inside the box was sealed with wax. I broke the seal and pulled out a note. It was the last piece of the puzzle. Your love is my legacy, it read. The weight of the envelope in my hand felt heavier now. The contents inside were a lifetime of sacrifice and love, a story of survival that had been buried in the silence of this cottage. I was no longer just Leo Vance, the boy abandoned by his mother. I was part of something much larger, a story that had been hidden from me for years, and now it was my story to carry. I sat back down, the box still open in front of me, the money inside feeling like a symbol of something far greater than its face value. My mother's love, her fight, her willingness to do whatever it took to protect me. It was all there in those letters, in the box, in the house itself. The decision had been made for me. I couldn't sell. I couldn't erase my mother's legacy. I reached for my phone, my hands now steady, the fear that had paralyzed me earlier gone. The decision I had been avoiding for so long was now clear. I had to stand my ground. I wasn't just rejecting the money. I was rejecting the man who had taken so much from my family. I wasn't running anymore. I called Ms. Albright first. Her voice came through, calm but with an edge of concern. Leo, she asked. Is everything all right? Everything is different now, I said, my voice firm and steady. I'm not selling. I'm going to pay the back taxes. I'll wire the money to the county tax office tomorrow. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her thinking, reconsidering everything. Are you sure about this? She asked, her voice softer now. What changed your mind? I found something, I said simply. I found my mother's story. And it's not over yet. I heard her sigh, her tone shifting slightly. All right, Leo, she said, a hint of respect in her voice that wasn't there before. I'll take care of the legal side. But be careful, these people don't like to be told no. I know, I replied, my voice unwavering. Thank you. I hung up and turned my attention to the number on the offer letter, Oakwood Development. I had to call them, make it clear that the deal was off. A slick, professional voice answered the phone, and I didn't waste any time. This is Leo Vance, I said. Regarding the property at 214 Stone Creek Road, I'm rejecting your offer. There was a brief silence on the other end before the voice grew colder. I think you're making a serious mistake, kid, the man said. That property is a teardown, it's worthless. Our offer was more than generous. I'm not selling, I said, my voice steady. The deal's off. The voice on the other end dropped lower, laced with a threat now. That land has a lot of complicated history. It's more trouble than it's worth. You should take the money, walk away, start fresh somewhere else. Thanks for the tip, I said, hanging up. My pulse was racing, but I felt alive in a way I never had before. I wasn't a victim of my past anymore. I was taking control of my future. The next morning, I walked the 2 miles into town. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow over the town. I walked into the general store, where George, the old man behind the counter, watched me count out the cash. The money was hard-earned, but it was mine to spend, to honor my mother's sacrifice. "Paying off your mother's debts, huh?" George said, watching me carefully. "She was a good woman, Leo, quiet, kept to herself, but she had a backbone made of steel." I nodded. "Yeah, she did." The validation from a stranger felt like a weight lifting from my chest. It was one small step in the right direction, but it was a start. I bought a crowbar, a hammer, and enough cleaning supplies to get started. For the next week, I worked tirelessly, fixing what had been broken for years. I tore down the boards from every window, the sound of splintering wood a reminder of everything that had been hidden. I scrubbed floors, patched walls, cleared the tangled weeds from the yard. Each swing of the hammer, each bag of trash I hauled away, was a piece of my past I was finally able to clear away. The work was grueling, but it felt cathartic. The house, once a symbol of neglect and abandonment, began to breathe again. With each repair, I felt myself healing too. I was no longer just the boy abandoned by his mother. I was the man rebuilding what was lost. A few of the locals noticed the changes. George brought me vegetables from his garden. An older woman stopped by with a loaf of fresh bread. They didn't ask questions. They just offered small gestures of support, simple acknowledgments that I belonged there now. And then, one evening, after a long day of work, I sat on the newly repaired porch and found an old cassette player, one of the tapes my mother had left behind. I put it in, the static crackling before the voice came through clear and strong. It was my mother's voice, not the voice from the letters, but the real, defiant voice of a woman who had refused to be silenced. I listened, transfixed, as she spoke. It wasn't just a voice from the past. It was a voice filled with strength, courage, and love. The woman who had fought for me, even from a distance. The woman who had never stopped loving me, even when I couldn't see it. For weeks, I continued to work. The cottage wasn't a ruin anymore. It was a home, simple and rustic, scarred by time but full of life. I repaired the roof, fixed the plumbing, and even planted a small garden where my mother had tried to grow tomatoes. This house, this broken-down cottage, had become my home, and I was finally able to say that I had a home of my own.